people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with the one-sided beating, the one-sided affair, Lauren Price's 3-round knockout of then unbeaten Matias, who was so obviously overmatched, and you could see that in the opening stanza.
The speed was too much.
Matias already facing a more fundamentally sound fighter and a more well-schooled fighter with the kind of amateur pedigree that she doesn't have and the kind of speed that she doesn't have. She was in over her head. It was like shooting fish in a barrel for Lauren Price. She couldn't miss.
Doesn't require much analysis.
Lauren's just too fast. She's too sharp. There was nothing that Matias could do about it. Couldn't counter, couldn't cover up, couldn't do anything. Knocked down in the first round, knocked down in the second, knocked out in the third.
This fight for Lauren Price was to Lauren what the Nina Menka fight was to Katie Taylor many years ago.
That's what it reminded me of. And it's hard to imagine that Natasha Jonas is going to go through with this fight.
That's what I was thinking.
Watching Lauren Price's speed, just watching her tee off on Matias, it's hard to imagine that Natasha's really going to go through with this fight, this unification match, when she has the option of running it back with Mikaela Mayer. And I don't rule out the possibility that could happen.
Ben Shalom and the guys at Boxer, they have their plans and they want to keep everything in-house. They want to do this. But Natasha's always gone her own way. Natasha's always done what's best for Natasha.
Whether it's not giving Terry Harper the satisfaction of a rematch, even though it could have been for Undisputed at Junior Middle, or leaving match room for Boxer,
Natasha's always done what's best for Natasha, even when people don't like it. So on the heels of this,
it is a bit hard to believe that she's going to go through with this. With Lauren Price having looked the way that she looked yesterday, she's younger, she's fresher, she's faster.
Lauren Price is not a smaller fighter that moved up in weight like Natasha Jonas is, like Mikaela Mayer is.
She's a true welter, and you can see that in her build, her frame. She's solid. I'm a big fan of Natasha Jonas, I have been for years, but if they actually fight, I think Lauren Price is not only going to win, I think she's going to stop her. I think she's going to knock Natasha Jonas out if they do fight.
Will they?
Lauren Price is not Natasha Jonas's only option for a unification match or a significant fight, a meaningful fight.
Mikaela Mayer has a belt now.
She could always try to run it back with Mikaela Mayer, even if it means having to come to America. I would not rule out a Mikaela Mayer rematch over a Lauren Price fight, because the way Lauren looked yesterday, Natasha's facing certain defeat.
The way Lauren looked yesterday, man, I don't like Tasha's chances at all.
Congratulations to Lauren Price for advancing to a professional record of 8-0 with 2 KOs. She's banked her second recorded knockout. Her power's coming along.
She looked great.
Over to the main event, where Natasha Jonas thoroughly outclassed Croatia's Ivana Habazin, then WBC champion, who came out very aggressive, doubling up on her jab, stepping into it as Natasha Jonas stayed on her toes, backing up, giving herself room to work.
Not staying stationary.
Feel-out round in the first round, and Natasha Jonas starts to open up more and try for more punches in the second. Good variety of them, good body shots, digging in, and regularly being on the better end of the exchanges, winning them whenever there were exchanges.
Why?
Natasha's punches are more compact, so they don't have to travel very far to reach the target. Because they're shorter and tighter, it's easier to slip them in there as opposed to the wider, messier, looping punches from Ivana Habazin.
Foot placement was a pretty big part of it too. Big part of the win for Natasha. She's staying on her toes and she's moving the whole time,
giving herself a clearer target in Ivana Habazin and making it that much harder for Ivana to get in with punches because she keeps moving.
She's got better feet.
The fourth round, we saw Natasha Jonas connect with a mammoth counter right hand that rocked Ivana Habazin, had her badly hurt.
Managed to survive.
Very strong Natasha Jonas round, the fourth round, stifling any momentum that Ivana might have thought she was amassing.
Managed to survive.
Story of the fight. is that ineffective aggression from Ivana Habazin as she's barreling forward was offset by the coordination and counter hooks of Natasha Jonas, who still has a strong enough punch to get her attention, get her respect, and back her off.
Defense was better, the hooks were tighter, the punches were shorter, regularly going upstairs and downstairs, whether it's body shots, uppercuts up the middle, or counter hooks to the head.
Natasha was better in every department, and there was very little that Ivana Habazin could do about it aside from trying the same thing that wasn't working.
Being aggressive.
As Ivana Habazin was the aggressor for the most part, and Natasha Jonas was the defender with the poise and power and countering ability to simmer her down whenever she needed to and fight her off.
Excellent display of boxing from the now unified welterweight champion. She was unified at junior middle, now she's unified at welter.
Done very well for herself against what is an experienced fighter and a two-time welterweight champion, because that's what Ivana Habazin was going in.
Some years ago, she held the IBF title. Some years later, she picked up the WBC. That is now in possession of Natasha Jonas.
Is she really going to fight Lauren Price, though? Because that's a very different fight to this one. All the countering opportunities, all the mistakes that Ivana Habazin makes, a Lauren Price doesn't make. So I do question as to whether or not that fight will actually happen, because as big a fan of Natasha as I am, that's one fight that I don't think she wins.
She looked fantastic yesterday.
So did Lauren. And Lauren's bigger, Lauren's younger, Lauren's faster. Congratulations to both. Excellent showing for both fighters, both champions. Let's see if they actually do meet in the coming year. We then move over to the main event of the Top Rank show on ESPN, Jaime Munguia's shock upset loss to Surace.
Cherry pick gone wrong.
And there's a lot to be said about the fight and what happened, but there's also a lot to be said about when the fight actually came on. That if you're in the East Coast or anywhere near it, these guys weren't in the ring with each other until well past midnight, which is hardly ideal for broadcasting a boxing match.
Why?
On a Saturday night, anybody who's still up at that time is likely having a night out at the movies or going to a club,
A lounge.
a restaurant, having a night out if they're up that late in the hour, which is hardly ideal for a boxing match. That boxing in the American boxing scene needs to do a little bit more to have these events happen earlier.
That's why I like those UK shows so much and those Riyadh season shows, because they start in the afternoon and end in the evening.
Jaime Munguia suffered a shocking 6th-round knockout loss this past Saturday to unheralded Frenchman Bruno Surace in a homecoming super middleweight fight in Munguia's native Tijuana, Mexico.
The homecoming curse, we talk about it all the time.
Surace, who going in was 25-0 with 2 draws and only 4 recorded knockouts, dropped Munguia for the count of 10 in round 6 with a single overhand right to spring the biggest boxing upset of this year. Munguia was also a favorite going in, and Surace was handpicked to deliver an easy stay-busy win for Munguia before seeking another high-profile fight in the coming year. Munguia, 44-2, 2 losses now, 35 knockouts, floored Surace with a powerful left hook about 1 minute into round 2. Surace, who was fighting outside of France for the very first time, suffered the first knockdown of his 28-fight career. Surace weathered the storm as Munguia pressed for the finish. Surace found his first moment in round 4 when he connected on a left uppercut, followed by a pair of chopping right hands that caught Munguia's attention. 2 rounds later, he returned to favor with a knockdown, only Munguia didn't beat the count. I know that he is an excellent boxer, Surace, 26 said through an interpreter, so we worked on our counterpunches. He is a true warrior. I want to thank him for the opportunity. This was the big experience for me. The victory was just Surace's 9th over an opponent with a winning record. The other guys he fought all had upside-down records. The referee's count appeared to be quick, but Munguia did seem to be in bad shape as he rose to his feet at 10. Munguia suffered the first loss of his career this past May when he was decisioned by Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo did not do to Munguia what Bruno did to Munguia. How do you reconcile it? How do you explain it? How do you wrap your mind around Canelo not knocking this guy out, but Bruno Surace does?
Just doesn't make sense.
It is so far a deviation from what anyone was expecting from this fight. I dare say it's a bigger upset than Daniel Dubois beating Anthony Joshua. A bigger upset even than Bakram Murtazaliev beating Tim Kazoo, because those were at least title fights.
Those guys were at least champions going in, and we knew a hell of a lot more about them than we knew about Bruno Surace, who had never fought outside of France until yesterday.
Just doesn't make sense. How does Jaime, of all people, get knocked out by this guy? The 28-year-old rebounded from the Canelo Alvarez loss earlier this year with a 10th round knockout of contender Eric Bazinian in September, but has lost 2 of his last 3 fights. He scored his best win last year, a decision over former champion Sergey Didivianchenko that was named ESPN's Fight of the Year. Now, the former junior middleweight champion figures to be on the wrong end of the upset of the year. Munguia entered the ring rated number 3 in the division by ESPN.
Theater-ready unexpected.
Isn't that what Jim Lampley used to say? Earlier in the week, the World Boxing Council ordered an interim title fight between Jaime Munguia and Christian Mabili, who is also promoted by Top Rank. The matchup shaped up as one of the best action fights in boxing, but now Munguia is sure to seek a rematch with Surace. Middleweight is my true weight class, Surace said, but we'll see if it can happen.
They better pay him well, because he doesn't have to fight Jaime Munguia. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to fight Christian Mabili either. He can go back to middleweight and use his newfound profile status to secure big fights.
More winnable ones than this one, more winnable than any of the fights at 168. How the hell did this happen?
Hometown curse.
You often hear me talk about what happened to Jarrett Hurd in his hometown fight with Julian Williams, and what happened to Julian Williams in his hometown fight with Jason Rosario, George Kambosos' 2 hometown fights with Devin Haney.
Subriel Matias' hometown fight with Liam Botto. Katie Taylor's hometown fight with Chantel Cameron.
It's not to say that every hometown fight ends in the hometown fighter losing. It doesn't.
Chris Billum Smith won his hometown fight. Natasha Jonas won her hometown fight. But there is a pattern, an established pattern, that a lot of times these homecomings, they don't go to plan.
Why? Is it that the fighter is distracted by the occasion, or is it that homecomings are often expected to be lighter touches and the fighter ends up with more than they bargained for?
They're asleep at the wheel.
I don't want to overthink this. Upsets happen, but one thing that stands out is that Jaime Munguia went back to Eric Morales. He was with Freddie Roach for something like 1 or 2 fights, and he was actually showing improvement. He was starting to look better.
But then he goes back to Eric Morales. Eric was a great fighter, but he's not a great trainer. Certainly not as experienced as Freddie.
So one thing, at least one thing that stands out is you left a veteran trainer, an experienced trainer that was actually making you better, to go back to the same guy.
You cheaped out.
You didn't want to pay extra for Freddie, and you ended up paying for it anyway. That's one thing that stands out. But yet another, that I haven't seen anybody else mention is that this was Jaime's 4th fight this year.
Huh?
He's fought 4 times. We're not taking into account whatever he sustained in the Canelo Alvarez fight and the more recent Eric Bazinian fight. That was not easy.
If you saw that fight, that wasn't a walk in the park for Jaime. He finished strong, but he took some lumps.
So that by the time he's in there with a Bruno Surace, he's kind of tenderized, he's kind of tired. They only picked this guy because they thought it was going to be easy. Guy with 4 knockouts going in.
They were looking for a lighter touch. Somebody easy that Jaime can pounce on.
You would have thought in Mexico, in Tijuana, Jaime would have got a little bit more consideration from the ref, but when the knockout happened, he did seem to wave him off kind of quick.
Could he have recovered?
It doesn't matter. This is by and large the biggest upset of the year because nobody, and I mean nobody, thought this was going to happen. With Anthony and Daniel, you had to at least acknowledge that Daniel was on a hot streak and he had some momentum going in. With Tim Tszyu and Bakram Murtazaliev, you had to at least acknowledge that Bakram was a champion and he was big for the weight, whereas in this fight,
There's no way. Guy who's never fought outside of France isn't a knockout puncher.
only 4 recorded knockouts going in. This is the last thing that anybody could expect. And the only way I can reconcile it is the damage that he took in the Canelo fight and some of the damage that he took in the Bazinian fight tenderized him in the Bruno Surace fight. Because this is so the opposite of what anybody thought.
Wow.
So maybe fighting 3 times earlier this year and taking some lumps in the process resulted in a more tenderized Jaime Munguia that was easier to knock out.
I remember Canelo said that he actually held off on knocking him out because he didn't want to embarrass him, that he carried him.
The end result of this fight lends credence to that notion. Still not a victory that's aging well for Canelo. On the plus side, a big upset like this one helps to keep things fresh, spontaneous, exciting, because when everything does go to plan, it gets boring, it gets predictable, and people don't really want to watch.
I'm sure there are a lot of people that skipped this one on the premise that Jaime should win. He should be able to beat this guy, and he didn't.
So when he doesn't, it forces all of us to question everything we think we know going into a boxing match and look at every upcoming boxing match through a different lens, that maybe we're going to be wrong about those too. Thus, there's more reason to watch, more reason to tune in, because you never really know until it's over.
Right?
I see a small flock of boo birds and Monday morning quarterbacks trying to validate themselves through this victory that they never really thought Jaime was any good anyway.
This upset.
A fleeting sense of vindication for all those guys and gals who have the proverbial tact of a rubber ball. Oh, because you never thought that Jaime was any good, so I guess you picked Bruno to win the fight, right?
Wrong.
They're just as shocked by this upset loss as everybody else, because this reads more like a freak accident than a natural occurrence. How does somebody like Jaime lose to somebody like Bruno? And the Boo Birds piping up now are only doing so because they've been wrong about so much already. They're looking for a victory wherever they could find it. So when a freak accident like this one happens,
They pretend they're not surprised.
these are very low-quality humans, low-quality people, greatly lacking character, and it's best to not mince words with them or waste time on them. There's nothing to be gained.
Jaime needs a rematch.
Fairly confident there was no rematch clause incorporated into the contract for this fight. This was intended to be an easy run-out for Jaime. A little keep busy fight against some unheralded Frenchman. France doesn't produce that many champion boxers anyway. I hardly think.
There was no cause for concern and no reason to think that Jaime might need a rematch clause incorporated into the contract for this fight.
I don't think he has one, but he sorely needs one. He needs a rematch to redeem himself, though the fact that he has two,
Still pretty bad that you needed 2 fights for 1 win over this guy?
few ways it could break down. They could do a rematch between Jaime and Bruno in the coming year, or they could feed Bruno to Christian Mabili. Use Bruno and a win over him to enhance his profile, since he's still an unbeaten fighter. He's pretty high-ranked via the WBC.
He goes in there, he pounces on the guy that knocked out Jaime Munguia. That's a feather in his cap. One that he needs.
For some reason, Fernando Beltran decided to take Jaime Munguia from Golden Boy Promotions over to Top Rank.
Is this Top Rank's fault? And they're matchmakers.
I wouldn't go that far. This was more of a Zen for Promotions show than a Top Rank show, which is why you didn't see very many, if any, Top Rank fighters on the undercard. At the helm of the promotion was Zenfer more than Top Rank. So what happened to Jaime?
If you're gonna blame the matchmakers, you would have to blame Zenfer's matchmakers, not Top Rank's.
Still something to be said about why Fernando Beltran, who has been Jaime's promoter for as long as I can remember, and he's actually the guy in charge, why did he funnel him to Top Rank? What was the intention? Was the intention to make a Christian Mabili fight?
I don't know.
And what about all those people that were talking down Eddie Hearn in Matchroom due to Mark Castro and Jaleel Hackett suffering their first professional losses? What do they have to say about Jaime's loss? What do they have to say about those matchmakers and the way that he's being moved, since they always have so much to say about Eddie?
I wonder what they have to say about this. Likely not a lot.
Not much. Reads more like a freak accident than a natural occurrence.